Hey everybody, I'm Rich from No More Statistics, and this is my friend here, Matt Cass. We're going to be talking today about a big issue nowadays, drug addiction. Now, Matt, to start off here, do you think that we're in the middle of a drug war?
I don't believe that we're in the middle of a drug war as you truly classify it. But I would say right now you're seeing there's a large influx of drugs over the border from Mexico. And in individual communities even, there is, people struggling. There are people struggling with opioid addiction. So it's kind of a non-traditional drug war in a way.
Well, what would be a traditional?
Traditional's, well, war, right? War is traditional. It's like the two armies fighting on the battlefield. But I think this is much more of an individual struggle. As you've seen with the heroin epidemic, for example, people are very reluctant to talk about it. So it becomes like an army of one fighting against the drug with no support.
So, do you feel like we talk enough about drug addiction nowadays?
The conversation is better than it was in the 80s and the 90s. But at the same time, I think there's still a much more honest discussion that we need to be having. It's not shameful to sit down with your parents and say, I'm addicted. The big question is, in terms of discussion, how do you get the person to the point where they're willing to talk, where they're willing to sit down and admit that they have hit rock bottom? Because for a lot of addicts, rock bottom is sometimes death. Sometimes there's really no way to reach them until it's too late, and they're in the hospital or they're in the cemetery.
So, what about this whole heroin problem right now? We know that there's a lot of opioids that cross the border. Now, what can we do, you think, about that kind of problem from the drug cartels?
Well, heroin itself is the means to an end. A lot of people get hooked on opioids when doctors prescribe them. Now, I'm not saying that all prescription drugs are bad, but what happens is doctor prescribes pain medication for, a broken bone. Suddenly your prescription ends, and you find yourself unable to sleep without, pain pills. Well, where are you going to turn? Suddenly here's this really cheap alternative to a doctor's prescription for heroin. And that's really where it goes. It goes from the legal cause to more of an illegal side.
Now, do you think there's any hope for drug-ridden places like Camden or Newark, Trenton?
Well, that kind of cycles back around to what I just said. For a lot of addicts, rock bottom is the point at which they say, I need help. I can't do this anymore. I can't cover up. I can't live the life that I've been living with this crutch, with this drug. So you can beautify an area. You can, create community centers. You can give kids a reason to stay, in school structures and, familial structures like rec league sports. But in the end, the person needs to come to you. That's really what it is. You can't come to them and offer the salvation. They need to come to you and be willing to accept it.
Yeah, it's like the term agency. A person has to be able to stand up for themselves and talk about it themselves. You can't talk about it for them. Well, when you were in high school, did they have any drug programs, say no to drugs, DARE, anything like that?
The most drug education I ever received was DARE in elementary school. For those of you guys watching in class, I'm sure you all had DARE, so I'm not going to go over it in too much detail. DARE was obviously, drugs are bad, marijuana's bad, heroin's bad, crack is bad, everything's bad, don't do it and you'll die. And I think after that, they just kind of cut us off cold turkey with no real education whatsoever. Even alcohol is, in some cases, a drug. So it was just like, okay, you're 18 now, you're 21 now, you can figure it out on your own. And I think, in a way, there really wasn't that education that gave us the agency to understand exactly what we were dealing with. And it's tough.
So I think it's changed from going to high school to the college level, maturity. You think it's more possible for a person to get hooked on drugs in this time of life?
Well, I think as long as you hit your adult stage, I think high school onward is when it's very easy because you're really starting to come into who you are. You're starting to, to become your own person. And sometimes you make choices and you make decisions that lead to heroin addiction. A lot of the people using heroin now, they come from all over the state, all over the country. You know, heroin and other drugs do not discriminate based on race, sexual orientation, you know, religious creed. They're
You could be the guy down the block.
And that's the thing. I think at any age you can become addicted to the drugs.
So, where do you think, as a nation, as like a state, like where can we go from here?
Well, if you read this wonderful piece, Heroin Town, by Steve Sterling from the Star Ledger, one of the biggest things is there's not enough treatment beds in the state. When an addict is ready to come to you and is ready to begin the process of coming down off their addiction, treatment beds are an excellent place for them to, you know, to go and, I guess, in quotes, sleep it off, if you will, although that doesn't even begin to describe the complexity of it. But there's not enough. There's a severe shortage in state. And I think we really also need to be much more frank, because in the past, when drug epidemics have hit, it's not us, it's not our family. And I think people really need to understand that, yes, it is us, it is our families. And it's the people around us, some of whom we might be the closest of friends with, but we don't know exactly what they're going through.
Yeah, it's so much more different when you put a face to it. It's not just numbers anymore, you know?
Exactly, that's what you get is real people who you know, who you've lived next door to for decades. And suddenly you realize exactly how pervasive this is.
Yeah, it's definitely a problem that we'll be tackling in the years to come here. But I'll be cutting off right there. Thank you for your time here, Matt.
Absolutely, it's a pleasure.
You're welcome. And this video has been brought to you by No More Statistics. Bye-bye.